When Robert Redford took his last breath on September 16, 2025, at 89 years old, the whole movie world was shocked. Thousands of people said goodbye, but only one tribute left everyone speechless: Meryl Streep's. Her words weren't just sad, but they also brought up a secret that had been hidden for many, many years. Because between Redford and Streep, being just friends was never enough to explain everything. The looks they gave each other, the things they said, and finally the emotional tribute made people wonder, was this her finally admitting to a love that was never told to the public? During the days when Hollywood was mourning, the world was amazed by a special letter Meryl Streep sent to Robert Redford's family, which was later shown by NBC on the Today Show from Rockefeller Plaza in New York. It wasn't a video of Meryl shaking in front of cameras, but handwritten words on a wrinkled page with tear stains that made all of America go quiet. Host Hoda Kotb's voice cracked as she read each line while the screen showed Meryl's tired face, her silver hair hanging down, and a simple gray sweater wrapped around her shoulders. The letter started with words that shook everyone there. A lion has fallen. To the world, Robert Redford is a legend. To me, he is a teacher, a friend, a soulmate. Every word touched the audience's hearts deeply. In the letter, Meryl talked about a winter night in 1979 when she couldn't decide between staying in New York theater or taking Hollywood jobs. Redford put his hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't be afraid of failing. Only be afraid when you don't dare to try." According to Meryl, those words changed her whole life. She also told a secret that had never been shared before. In 1984, when director Sidney Pollack wasn't sure about who should play the main woman in Out of Africa, it was Redford who called him and said, "Choose Meryl. She'll make this movie unforgettable." That one phone call changed Streep from a good actress into a worldwide superstar. "Without Robert, there would be no Meryl Streep today," she wrote. The letter also talked about a private moment on the movie set in Kenya. During a scene by a river, Meryl was so nervous she was shaking. Redford pulled her to the side, gave her a hot cup of tea, and whispered softly, "Meryl, you don't need to pretend. Just be real." The camera caught that exact moment, and according to Sidney Pollack's 1999 interview with the Los Angeles Times, it was the most beautiful shot he ever filmed. NBC said that just hours after the letter was read on TV, the video clip of Kotb reading it got over 25 million views online, beating the record from Kobe Bryant's 2020 memorial. Variety magazine called it a TV moment that made America freeze in silence. The Los Angeles Times said, it became #1 around the world, filling up Twitter and TikTok. Vanity Fair's Richard Lawson wrote, "Among thousands of goodbyes, nothing was as haunting as the way Meryl compared Redford to a lion. It was like giving Hollywood's king his final crown." BBC simply said, "Never before has a personal goodbye shaken the world like this." Right after that, people everywhere remembered the movie that connected them together, Out of Africa. In the wild lands of Kenya, their love story grew. They faced wild lions together and flew above Africa in the famous Flying Over Africa scene, creating an image that would stay in movie history forever. But, like every sad love story, this one ended with heartbreak. Dennis, the free-spirited hunter, said no to marriage and died in a plane crash. His grave was on the huge open plains where lions would come to rest, looking out over the African fields. That's why Meryl's letter wasn't just saying goodbye, but also a spooky proof that between her and Redford there was a connection far deeper than friendship, a secret the public had wondered about for almost 50 years. Everything started in 1985 when they acted together in Sidney Pollack's Out of Africa. The movie won 7 Oscars, but what people remembered most wasn't the story or the big, beautiful scenes. It was the almost too real chemistry between Redford and Streep. Every touch, every look was so natural that many movie critics said they weren't acting, they were really in love. Years later, in 1999, Meryl Streep told the Los Angeles Times that during the hair-washing scene by the river, she felt as if I were really in love. That short comment was quickly turned into headlines like, "Meryl admits being in love with Redford on screen or off," which caused big debates about their relationship. Just 1 year after the movie came out, in May 1986, People magazine wrote an article saying there were secret meetings between Redford and Streep in New York. According to someone who saw them, they often went to a fancy apartment near Central Park and were seen eating dinner together closely at Le Cirque, a restaurant where rich Manhattan people went. The gossip got even bigger in May 1987 at the Cannes Film Festival. A French photographer named Jean-Claude Moreau said he took pictures of Redford and Streep holding hands along the Seine River after Out of Africa's screening. On French TV, he said that a Hollywood producer bought the film for over $50,000 to hide the scandal. He insisted that wasn't acting anymore. Their eyes told the whole story. Back in the U.S., rumors spread so much that during a Los Angeles press meeting, a reporter asked Redford directly, "Are you in love with Meryl Streep?" Redford only smiled and gave an unclear answer. Love has many forms. Sometimes it doesn't need a name. His confusing answer made the gossip even bigger. Even at the 1986 Oscars, when Streep got her award, cameras caught Redford in the audience, staring at her intensely. Tabloid magazines like National Enquirer had headlines saying, "Redford's eyes say more than 1,000 words." By the late 80s, Redford and Streep were almost every talk show's favorite topic. On The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson in 1988, Carson joked, "Robert, should we get a wedding cake ready here?" The studio burst out laughing, but Redford stayed quiet, just shrugging a little. His silence only made the audience more suspicious. The timing got mixed up with Redford's private life. He married Lola Van Vogenen in 1958 and got divorced in 1985, right when Out of Africa became huge. The New York Post hinted that Meryl appeared just as Redford was lonely. Later, when Redford married again to German painter Sibylle Zagars in 2009, she was asked about the street rumors. According to the Daily Mail, she said, "I'm not jealous of the past. Robert had soulmates of his own, and Meryl is one of them." Even though both said they were just friends, weird details kept popping up. In a 1990 BBC radio interview, Streep accidentally said, "Robert is the only man who makes me feel safe looking into his eyes for too long." The Independent newspaper wrote, "Meryl confesses feelings for Redford, starting debates all over again." Their co-workers also added fuel to the fire. Jane Fonda told Variety, "When Robert and Meryl are in the same room, you feel like they share a language no one else understands." An unnamed director told Vanity Fair, "I once saw Redford put his hand on Meryl's shoulder after a difficult scene. The way he looked at her, I never saw him look at anyone else like that." This mix of being close but also distant split what people thought. Some believed they were just special soulmates in Hollywood's fake world. Others were sure it was a love that could never be told. But nobody could deny their lasting friendship of more than 40 years. Streep often flew to Utah to support Redford at Sundance. Redford never missed times when Streep was getting awards at the Oscars or Golden Globes. Each time they appeared together, cameras followed them, making people whisper, "Are they just friends or something more?" And when Meryl Streep got emotional calling Redford a soulmate for over 40 years on NBC in September 2025, the long-buried rumors came rushing back like a huge storm. But Meryl Streep wasn't the only one sad about Redford. Right after, countless Hollywood stars spoke up, creating a wave of goodbyes like never before for the legend. Robert Redford's death hit Hollywood like a bolt of lightning. Within hours, the entertainment world and even world leaders were mourning. But what touched people most weren't stiff goodbyes, but deeply personal memories, hidden connections, and long-kept stories finally being told. Barbra Streisand was one of the first to speak. She didn't just write a few lines, but also shared a never-before-seen backstage photo of her and Redford laughing after a scene in The Way We Were from 1973. She wrote, "Behind the spotlight, Robert was a playful man who always made me laugh. I'll remember that forever." Fans got excited remembering rumors about her special feelings for him. The photo with their natural smiles suggested a secret that was never spoken. Jane Fonda cried on ABC News, "Every time I acted with Robert, I fell in love with him all over again. Few people knew that in 1979, when she was having marriage problems, Redford took her to his Utah ranch for peace and quiet. A shared friend told the Los Angeles Times, Jane stayed for a week. Robert just listened without judging, without giving lectures. He simply listened. For Jane, he was more than someone she acted with. He was the only shoulder to lean on when she was at her weakest. Director James Gunn called Redford a true movie star. He told everyone that Redford said no to a role in Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 2 because of health problems. "I'll regret missing that chance forever," Gunn admitted, showing that even young directors looked up to Redford as an untouchable legend. Antonio Banderas shared a surprising story. "When I first came to Hollywood in 1993, nobody knew who I was. But Redford personally called a Paramount producer. 'Give this young man a chance. I believe in him,' Banderas said with emotion. 'Robert opened my first door. He's the reason I stayed in Hollywood.'" Ron Howard, director of A Beautiful Mind, remembered a very simple moment. "I asked Robert why he named it Sundance. He laughed. I didn't want it named after me. I wanted it to belong to everyone." Howard said that this humble attitude made Sundance a home for thousands of independent filmmakers from Quentin Tarantino to Darren Aronofsky. To Howard, Redford was not only a co-worker, but a quiet teacher who changed the history of movies. But Redford also had rivals and even enemies. In the 70s, he fought against Hollywood big shots by openly criticizing censorship. Near the end of his life, he directly wrote in the Washington Post that Donald Trump had dictator-like tendencies that were hurting American democracy. When Redford died, Trump still admitted, he once had a time when no one could match him. "I think he was great." A relationship of polite respect on the surface, but inner conflict until the very end. Of course, the heartfelt tributes went even further. Rosie O'Donnell wrote, "Oh, Hubble will never be the same. Good night, Bob." Stephen King posted on X, "Hard to believe Redford was 89. He was the symbol of a new Hollywood." Coleman Domingo, Rita Wilson, Marlee Matlin. Each connected Redford to a personal memory, a piece of advice, a chance, a festival that changed their careers. Looking at these tributes, one thing became super clear. Robert Redford was not only a movie star. He was a friend, a soulmate, a teacher, an ally, and sometimes an enemy who wouldn't back down. He showed up as a complicated but real man, leaving his mark on every relationship, every life he touched. After that huge storm of sadness, people started to ask, how could a troublemaking boy from California, who once got kicked out of school for drinking, walk such a long path to become a legend who made the whole world bow down? Robert Redford was born in 1936 in Santa Monica, California, to a working-class family. His father, Charles Robert Redford Sr., was an accountant for Standard Oil, while his mother, Martha Hart, did all kinds of random jobs to help pay the bills. Redford's childhood was far from easy. Friends said young Robert was wild, often skipping school to draw funny pictures, and was even warned by local police for stealing hubcaps from cars. At 19, Redford got a baseball scholarship at the University of Colorado, a life-changing chance for the poor kid. But his reckless behavior made him lose it all. According to the Denver Post, Redford had his scholarship taken away after being caught drunk right on campus. He was kicked out, leaving his family shocked. Later, Redford admitted, "I almost lost everything because of alcohol and my own carelessness." That downward spiral opened a life-changing turn. After leaving school, Redford decided to travel across Europe. He wandered around Paris, drawing sketches on Pont Neuf Bridge to earn a few francs. In Florence, he studied painting, while in Rome, he sometimes had to sleep inside old churches. Once, while hitchhiking from Barcelona to Madrid, thieves stole all his stuff, forcing him to live in a student dorm for weeks. That experience taught Redford that art wasn't only about painting or stage work, but also about being tough enough to survive hard times. In the late 1950s, Redford came back to New York. At first, he joined Pratt Institute to study stage design, but the stage lights pulled him in more than any drawing ever could. He quickly switched to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. A teacher told the New York Times, "Robert wasn't the best student, But his eyes had a strange pull. When he looked at you, the audience couldn't look away. In 1963, Redford became famous on Broadway with Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park, acting alongside Elizabeth Ashley. New York audiences went crazy for the blond young man with the bright smile. The New York Post called him a fresh breeze on Broadway. This success soon got Hollywood's attention. The real big break came in 1969 when Redford starred with Paul Newman in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The film made tons of money and turned Redford into a worldwide icon. The name Sundance Kid stuck with him so strongly that later he used it to name both his vacation spot and the film festival he started. The Los Angeles Times said at the time, Paul Newman was the experienced star, but Robert Redford was the one who kept audiences glued to the screen. In the 1970s, Redford continued to rule the box office. With The Sting and The Way We Were, both released in 1973, he became the #1 male star for 3 years in a row. Behind the scenes of The Way We Were, Barbra Streisand told Vanity Fair that she was so stunned by Robert's good looks that, sometimes, I forgot my lines. Even though both always said no to romance rumors, their chemistry became legendary. By the late 1970s, Redford was not only called the most handsome man in the world according to People magazine, but also proved he could take on deep, complicated roles in both dramatic and action movies. He wasn't just a pretty face that made money, but an actor Hollywood had to respect for his talent. His journey from a rebellious kid who almost lost his career to becoming a global star is really a rare story. But what truly made Redford different wasn't just acting. His brave choice to step behind the camera, becoming a director and the founder of Sundance, was what helped change American movies itself. If the 1970s made Robert Redford a shining box office star, the 1980s brought a bigger change. He stepped away from the glamorous image of a movie idol to become the godfather of independent film. In 1980, Redford started the Sundance Institute in Utah. The location wasn't random. Since the late 1960s, he had bought hundreds of acres in the Wasatch Mountains, about 50 kilometers from Salt Lake City, as a getaway and ski place. At first, Redford only meant it as a creative hideaway for friends. But after trips to Europe where he saw independent movies celebrated at Cannes and Venice, he had a daring idea. Hollywood also needs a place where small voices can be heard. He said that phrase many times throughout his career. Even in 2018, at age 82, he told the Associated Press, "The key word I always believe in is independence. I want forgotten voices to have a chance to be heard." From the start, Sundance became a launching pad for a whole generation of directors. Quentin Tarantino brought Reservoir Dogs in 1992 there when nobody knew who he was, and instantly made big waves. Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape from 1989 also came from Sundance, paving the way for the American indie wave. Later, Paul Thomas Anderson, Darren Aronofsky, Kevin Smith, Catherine Bigelow all found their chance there. Few people know that to keep Sundance alive, Redford had to give up a lot. According to the Los Angeles Times, in the mid-1980s, money ran out, and many colleagues told him to give up. No one wants to see independent films, but Redford refused to quit. He sold part of his land in Utah to keep the institute running, a move people thought was risky, but it saved Sundance from falling apart. Sundance was not just a festival, it became a cultural movement. American media called Redford a gentle rebel who dared to go against Hollywood to protect forgotten stories. Critic Roger Ebert wrote, "Robert Redford changed the way we see cinema. He didn't just act, he created a whole generation of filmmakers." Sometimes the festival's growing fame threatened to destroy its original spirit. In 1994, when a big company wanted to sponsor it and turn it into a giant advertising box, Redford flatly said no. He accepted losing millions of dollars but kept the independence of Sundance. That decision made his image even stronger as an artist who never sold his soul to Hollywood. Today, Sundance is called the largest independent film festival in the world, where countless A-list stars like Jennifer Lawrence, Ryan Gosling, or Carey Mulligan started their careers. The Guardian wrote in 2016, Without Redford, perhaps there would be no Tarantino, Aronofsky, or Paul Thomas Anderson. He changed the DNA of American cinema. Thanks to Sundance, Redford is remembered not only as a handsome actor, but as a cultural revolutionary. A man who gave up personal wealth to keep a place for independent film. But behind the shining career, Redford's private life was filled with pain few people expected. Family tragedies and quiet losses shaped his soul, perhaps making him deeper and more thoughtful in every role. Behind the glory of a world-admired star, Robert Redford was a man who carried too many private sorrows. He rarely talked about them, but they quietly flowed into each of his roles, giving audiences a unique emotional depth. The first tragedy hit early. In 1959, at only 23 and just starting his acting career in New York, Redford and his first wife, Lola Van Vogenen, welcomed their first son, Scott. But only months later, the baby suddenly died of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. The tragedy happened in their small Manhattan apartment, leaving a wound the couple never healed from. In a rare interview with NPR in 2018, Redford admitted, "Losing a child is something you never truly recover from. It changes you forever." His second son, James Jamie Redford, born in 1962, suffered from a rare liver disease since he was a child. In 1993, Jamie had his first liver transplant at Stanford Medical Center, but months later needed a second one because of complications. Redford, at the peak of his career, dropped everything to stay by his son's side. A doctor told the Los Angeles Times, Robert sat for hours by the bedside, holding his son's hand in silence. He just smiled as if to give Jamie strength to keep going. But fate was cruel. After years of struggling, Jamie passed away in 2020 from bile duct cancer at 58 years old. Redford, then 84, wrote briefly on Twitter, "We lost a bright soul. Jamie was my light." The pain didn't end there. In 1983, his daughter Shauna Redford faced horror when her boyfriend, Sid Wells, was shot dead in his Boulder, Colorado apartment. At that moment, Redford was attending the premiere of The Natural in New York. A photographer told Vanity Fair, "I saw him standing alone backstage, eyes red. When I came closer, Robert whispered, 'I don't know how to face Shauna anymore.'" The Sid Wells case remains unsolved, adding to the family's pain. Beyond losing children, Redford's first marriage to Lola Van Vogenen ended after 27 years. Friends said that the family tragedies, the death of one child and another's illness, put unbearable pressure on the marriage. Later, when Redford married again to artist Sybil Zagars, he told The Telegraph, "I lost too many people in life, and I learned that love should never be taken for granted." These shadows made Redford more private. He rarely showed emotions in public, instead putting everything into his characters. That's why audiences watching him in Ordinary People from 1980, or All Is Lost from 2013, felt the raw honesty. More than acting, they were wounds from life itself. One less-known detail, in 1994, when Redford was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Berlin Film Festival, he almost refused. A source told The Hollywood Reporter, he said he didn't deserve it because at that moment he felt filled only with loss. But, in the end, Redford went on stage, smiling calmly, and said a line that silenced the hall. "Each of us carries darkness. I just try to turn mine into light on screen." His pride in facing tragedy created Redford's unique depth. People loved him, not just for his timeless looks or talent, but for the way he turned personal pain into inspiration for millions. Perhaps it was these losses that led Robert Redford to choose a surprisingly simple farewell. When he passed away in September 2025, there were no fancy flowers, no golden casket, no thousands of guests, just a quiet goodbye at his private ranch in Sundance, Utah, as his will had asked for. On the morning of September 20th, the funeral took place under pine and juniper trees where Redford often wrote scripts. The sky was clear, a breeze blowing gently with only birdsong and rustling leaves. No cameras, no reporters were allowed. Police set up barriers 3 kilometers from the gate, leaving the media waiting outside. At the funeral, there was no priest, no choir, not even giant flower arrangements typical of a star's funeral, only his wife. Artist Sybil Saggers, his 2 daughters Shauna and Amy, and 7 grandchildren sat in a circle surrounded by faint incense smell. Sybil held an old notebook, reading pages Redford had written in 1991 after winning the Oscar for Ordinary People. Success means nothing if we forget the silence of nature. When I die, let the wind in the mountains be my farewell. Hearing this, many people cried. The funeral ended with a moment of silence. No music, no sad trumpet, only the sound of the wind through the forest. Nature's most real hymn. The quietness in Utah that day surprised many people, even causing arguments. People had imagined a legend like Redford would have a grand funeral with thousands of stars and a red carpet like a movie premiere. But reality was the opposite. He chose to leave as an ordinary man, closing his life in the arms of family and nature. But only months later, across the country in Hollywood, came a completely opposite scene. In late November, at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, the home of the Oscars, hundreds of stars gathered for a public memorial for Robert Redford. From the afternoon, Hollywood Boulevard was packed with crowds. International media lined up their cameras. A red carpet stretched along like another Oscars night. But this time, the only missing star was the one being honored. Inside, a giant screen replayed iconic moments. Redford riding with Paul Newman in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, smiling with Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were, gazing tenderly at Meryl Streep in Out of Africa. Each scene brought tears from the audience. Meryl Streep, in a simple black dress, stepped on stage and got emotional. Robert was my soulmate. When a lion falls, the whole forest changes forever. The audience went silent, then broke into tears. Jane Fonda shook as she said, "At times in life, Robert was the only one I trusted. I loved him both on screen and off." Barbra Streisand held up an unpublished backstage photo of herself and Redford laughing together. The hall erupted in emotion. A standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. A Variety editor wrote, "This was Robert Redford's final Oscars. Not an award, but the world's bow to a legend." So, side by side, the private funeral in Utah and the dazzling Hollywood memorial created 2 shocking contrasts. One was peaceful quiet in the mountains where Redford left as a simple man. The other was brilliant glory where Hollywood and the world cried for an immortal star. Robert Redford ended his journey in simplicity, but the legacy he left is bright and eternal. From Meryl Streep's emotional tribute to Jane Fonda and Barbra Streisand's shaking memories, it all shows Redford wasn't just a star, but part of Hollywood's shared memory. The man is gone, but his films, his stories, and even the secrets surrounding him will forever keep audiences curious. And you, what do you think of the friendship, or perhaps love, between Robert Redford and Meryl Streep? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can talk together. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll always hear the most striking backstage stories of Hollywood you've never known before.